Hi, everybody. This is Travis from The Berm Show. Lower 22 Vets is a social media platform exclusively for active duty and veterans. Connect, communicate, and network with your own. Sign up is free and easy with giveaways each month. Download on Apple Store or Google Play. All right, everybody. Today we are here with a veteran as well as normal here with Danny Mayberry, who's going to be hosting his own podcast coming up pretty soon, September 5th, I believe. 1 Mile, One Veteran, which I'm pumped for actually, because I know you said it's built for like a mile. Each podcast is like the length of walking a mile, and I do a lot of walking, so I am super pumped to listen to it when it comes out. But,
yeah, we record for a little bit longer, so there are extended episodes available for those behind our membership walls. But the episodes are geared out to be timed out to be about 20 to 24 minutes, which is about the average time it takes to walk a mile. Because like sometimes it's just hard for a lot of veterans to actually make it out the door. And so like a 20-minute walk, and then you're walking around with a familiar voice in your ear. You get a full episode versus listening to something that maybe 40 minutes that you can't necessarily walk to, so you end up just putting it on while you're sitting at the desk working or something like that, which is great for those that like that company while they're working. But I like to go out and walk. I live out here in Hawaii, and so it's sometimes I don't want to deal with the crowds, and I just want to put on some headphones and get a short little.
Yeah, there's no better place to walk, I'm sure, than some beaches in
Exactly.
Hawaii. Well, that's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm looking forward to it tremendously. I do a lot of walking, put headphones on and stuff like that, and yeah, so I'm really pumped for it. Just veterans in general, I like listening to the veterans podcasts. I've been doing that quite a bit lately. It's just interesting hearing different stories from different folks, and that's why I can't wait for yours to come out as well. It's always good. I mean, there can never be too many veterans reaching out and helping other veterans, in my opinion. So whatever gets that veteran through the day, I mean, that's what's most important. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So kind of want to jump into a little bit of your background. Like what branch were you in? What led you to join the military? A little bit about yourself.
Okay. Yeah. So I joined the Navy in 2002, 7 days after I graduated high school. And what actually led me to join was my father was in the Navy. And then when I was going into high school, my brother had just joined the Navy and got stationed on an aircraft carrier in Norfolk, which was where I was living with my mom at the time. And he was introducing me around to his buddies. I got to go on a Tiger cruise, which is when they bring on family members and civilians to go out and do a float. And he worked in the aviation community, and he said, "Hey, promise me that you'll join the service and join the Navy after you graduate high school." And I said yes when I was 13 years old. Right?
That's a bold commitment at 13.
Right, but I love my family. I love and respect my brother, and it was something that he was encouraging me to do. I almost backed out of it. I moved around a lot in high school, went to 5 different high schools, and got to have a bunch of different experiences. I really got into the arts and acting and theater and stuff like that, and actually got a few scholarship offers. So when the time came to actually sign up and leave the summer of 2002, I almost hesitated. And he was just like, "Hey, remember, you gave your word. You're going to do this. It's 5 years, and then you can go to school and you can have the rest of your life." And it was just like a good realization of we get to do a lot of things in our lives, but serving in the military is definitely something that I felt very honored and privileged to be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's 5 years or 4 years of your life. And when the podcast I actually just started listening to, the individual that was a guest on there, he was saying it might seem insignificant, but you're far more prepared for life than you think. And he was saying something along the lines, I can't remember his name, but that maybe that's what veterans struggle with, is realizing the skills and knowledge they've obtained in those, even though it might seem insignificant, those 4 years, those 5 years, and the adjustment period, they might not fully understand what they've accomplished. So I totally agree. I mean, it's scary. I think a lot of us have been at that point. I remember signing in or listening to, you're like, holy crap, like when you actually sign, you're like, this is happening now. Like there's like no turning back. I remember like looking, like signing everything. I was like what do I do if I want to change my mind? It's like
what
really
18-year-old signs up what 18-year-old signs up for a life insurance policy?
Exactly.
Right?
Oh, see, there goes the dogger. But yeah, it took me a few years till after I got out of the military to realize that too. It's like, how many like people are like divvying up like a will at 17, 18 years old. It's kind of you don't think of it at the time, but I was like, man, I can't believe I wasn't even like intimidated. I was just like, oh yeah, this person will get that. Like, this is the military, you're so naive and ignorant. And like I have a military family as well. Nobody really explained that stuff. It's just like, oh yeah, you just join and have a good 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, what were some of your experiences as well? Like, where were you stationed? Where did you end up doing while you were in?
Yeah, so when I initially joined, I actually joined as an aircrew rescue swimmer, and there were some family emergencies that came up while I was in training. So I decided to drop that school on request with the intention of going back. I had a good recommendation from my instructors put in my training jacket saying, like, there's some extenuating circumstances, and I got to pick a ship out of Norfolk, and I went home and got to be with my family while they were going through some difficult transitions. But I was undesignated, so I didn't really have a job, and I was an airman on an LPD, which is an amphibious ship with a aviation department of about 23 individuals, and all we do is land helicopters.
That's small.
Yeah, so it was also back from its final deployment, so it wasn't going to be deployed anymore. It was actually in the process of getting decommissioned. And it just wasn't a lot of exciting work for me. It was a lot of paint shipping and watch standing and shipyard times in Portsmouth. And for any of those sailors that have been in Portsmouth in dry dock, you're driving an hour away from where you live. You're dealing with different tunnel traffic, and during the winter was very frigid, and so. I was actually having a really difficult time adjusting to life in the Navy because I thought it was going to be a little bit more fast-paced. I thought it was going to be a little bit more active, and there was a lot more solitary time than I anticipated, especially being 18, 19 years old. And I was also hanging out with a lot of the same people that I hung out with in high school at the time, doing a lot of the same dumb stuff that I was doing in high school at the time. So I got a chance to speak to the command master chief and the career counselor, and they were just like, hey, we know that you're not adjusting very well. What do you think that we can do for you? And I was just like, honestly, my job is not one that I really enjoy. I'd like to see what other options are there, and get involved in something that's a little bit more my speed, more in line with what my goals are. And they introduced me to all these different rates, OSs and FTs and ETs and all this stuff. And then one day I walked into the aid station, sick hall, and I got to meet some of the corpsmen and figure out what their job was. And I just fell in love. Like, you got to help people, you got to fix wounds, you got to give shots, and just like do all of this really interactive stuff. You're working directly with people, and that's one of the things that I love doing. Like, I love working with people. When I was in high school, like, I loved working customer service and stuff like that to help people find what it is, the solutions that they were looking for. And so being a corpsman allowed me the opportunity to do that. I got to work there probably for about a month while I got some sign-offs, and they sent me to Corps School in 2004. And while I was there, I picked my next duty station, right? And then I saw that Hawaii was an option. And so I was just like, let me try Hawaii. Had no clue what that meant, other than I got to go serve with the Marines, and there was a possibility of doing a Westpac, which was my family was all East Coast, so they did all the med cruises and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get to do a Westpac. But this was late 2004, and there was wars going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so when I checked in on September 30th, a spot opened up for one of the deploying units to Afghanistan, and I volunteered to go. And a month later, I was in Afghanistan. Forgot to tell my family, though.
It's like, oh, hey guys, tomorrow I'm actually going to Afghanistan.
Actually, so you say that, but like I got to Hawaii September 30th. They knew I was coming here. 3 days later, I found out I was going to go to Afghanistan in November, and I sent my dad a picture just after Thanksgiving, and called him on Christmas. And he said, "Daniel, where are you?" And I was like, "I'm in Afghanistan, Dad." So, what do you mean? Is there some sort of port? Like, that's a landlocked country, isn't it? I was like, yeah, I'm with the Marines. He goes, what do you mean you're with the Marines in Afghanistan? He goes, so this is real. Like you're marching around with a bunch of guys, fighting a war. And I was like, I mean, yeah, I thought I told you.
Well, I don't think a lot of people even realize that, though. The Marines are a branch of the Navy, so it's like probably was like a mind like a shock, like, whoa, what the hell? Like, Marines, you joined the Navy, you're not supposed to be in the desert. It's like, that's a different kind of sand. That's not Hawaiian sand.
Yeah. So I mean, it was awesome. But a bunch of guys, we did a lot of work, and thank goodness there was like more senior guys, because I didn't get to do any of the workups. I literally checked in, went on 2 weeks leave, and then we were in country, and I was meeting my the guys that I was going to be with for the next 7.5 months, pretty much in country. So they had a lot to teach me. I wasn't in the best shape. I mean, I was in decent shape, but I still smoked, and I still had a little bit of that sailor mentality of not knowing what Marines do. And they taught me a lot. They trained me a lot, and it was a great learning experience. And I had so many stellar guys there to help me kind of on my way.
Yeah, I can only imagine, because like you were saying, how you're basically just kind of twiddling your thumbs at first. And I'm sure you had like you said, a different expectation of what the Navy was, because your brother was in, and if he was in the aviation realm of things like I was, it's super fast paced. I was on the carrier, and it's constantly moving. Got jets shooting off, helicopters landing and going, and people are running around and yelling. And then to just kind of not get to experience that. But then, I mean, just the complete change from night to day, from sitting around figuring out what you're going to do in the military to, oh, now you're being deployed. Was there even a part of you where you're like thinking, well, this is taking a turn in a totally different direction than I had anticipated when I first enlisted?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Like I said, I joined to do the rescue swimming thing because I like the idea of helping people. I like the idea of just my dad says that I've always done just crazy stuff, and I don't really see it until you look at it in retrospect, and you're just like, yeah, that probably like could have resulted in serious bodily harm, but I survived. And so when I got with the Marines, like, I got really excited. My grandfather, my stepmom's dad, he was a Marine, actually out in Marine Corps base Kaneohe, and deployed to Vietnam. And so I was really honored to kind of even be a part of that legacy. And one of my little brothers ended up joining the Marines towards the end of my career, and I was super proud of him. I think it is a very tight knit community. Very supportive and stuff like that, and they really have this mentality of no one left behind. And that doesn't just apply to like the combat zone, but like they don't want anybody to fall out. They don't want anybody to have a difficult time, but they want everybody to rise to meet the occasion of whatever the mission was. And I was never a part of a athletic team, but I was part of a drama troupe. And when everybody's pushing towards that excellence, it's a very exciting environment to be around because it's very positive, regardless of like the negativity that people would say if you're not complaining, you're not working. Like that's just part of kind of what we did. But like we were all happy to do it. We all look back on that time and say like that was some of the greatest experiences of our lives. We got a chance to serve and really help out a people group, because we were, for the majority of our deployments at that time, it was very much like humanitarian hearts and minds in nature. And so we were there to help the communities, and we engaged when necessary.
Yeah, that got to be intense. So, man, just thinking about that, even like comparing from what it sounds like your experiences to the typical Navy experience, totally different. I mean, I can just think to like my experiences in the Navy. I mean, we had those goals, but it wasn't such a like hard embedded in you type like it sounds like the Marine Corps is, where I mean there is one mission, this is what we got to do every single day. The Navy, you can kind of mess around a little bit. Like you said, you do pick up bad habits like smoking. There's all these breaks in between. You can make breaks happen, so to say. You can kind of there's like the random stuff like cleaning stations where people kind of skate off and you don't see them.
Yeah.
But the one thing I've always told people that is very unique to the military, sounds like even for yourself, like you have these goals with these individuals, but the diversity in those groups are what makes it even more impressive, I think, because I mean it's not like you were saying when you were first stationed in Norfolk and it was all your high school buddies. It's different. It's a totally different group of guys or gals. They're from all different walks of life, rich, poor, sometimes even different countries. I've had some folks that I served with that weren't from the United States, and but at the same time, you wake up, you do the same things every day with them. It's so hard to duplicate that. And I know, like I've mentioned a couple times on a few episodes, I haven't really seen that too often anywhere else, where you have such a diverse group of individuals who can put whatever differences aside and move forward and accomplish a task. And I think that's probably the most impressive thing about the military. And people don't maybe realize that when they get out initially. It's like you have a very unique skill set as a veteran to adapt to a number of different scenarios and situations, just because of those experiences. Like you were saying, you don't always fire upon people or take action, but you're helping people. That's your main task, is to help people. But then that task can change in a split second, if something happens. Which is very unique and awesome. I mean, thank you for doing all those things, and that's amazing. So also want to. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I don't know. I was going to say, like, it's just such an honor. The path that my career took me. I mean, right after that deployment, I picked up in the same way that Navy picks up, with the advancement exams, and I got an opportunity to be a part of a military training team to Iraq. And so it was me and 11 other guys training an Iraqi battalion on how to take over security in their area. And I got to teach them, basic first aid, sick call practices and stuff like that. And so, bringing that back with me when we came back to Hawaii, I got to then train junior guys. I got meritoriously promoted to E5 and got to train junior guys in a classroom setting for 2 years on how to take care of people. I got to help be a part of that team building for many operational units from Hawaii to New York, and just teach them right here in Hawaii and say, hey, like, this is how we take care of people in combat injuries and keep each other alive and going forward.
Was there ever even a time in that transition from where you started and when you first enlisted and you're in Hawaii, now you're training people, you've been to Afghanistan, you've done all these things, we were like sitting back, was there ever a time where you're just to sit back and say like, wow, look what I've done in X amount of years? That was kind of unscripted. I mean, it seems like things kind of just fell into place. I mean, you made them happen at the same time, but it's like such a I've never heard of a path like this from in the Navy
It's
from anybody. It's very, very unique. So I'm just curious, like, man, how was your mind thinking, like,
I I
thinking
felt like
this?
an imposter most of the time. They call it imposter syndrome, fake it until you make it. But coming from where I came from, coming in, in the military, 18 at 18, fresh out of high school, no life experience beyond a difficult upbringing with very loving people around me. Um, I didn't really know about setting plans or setting goals, and so like my mentality was, hey, with this first enlistment, if I pick up E5, I'll re-enlist, and then I'll pick up E6. If I pick up E6, I'll do another 4 years, and we'll just kind of see where things go. Like that was my mentality, but for whatever reason, the leaders above me put me in positions where they just set up my career. They set up my path, and I mean, while I let it happen, um, I was very grateful that people took an interest in what it was that I was doing. I mean, I worked hard. Don't get me wrong. I did work
Yeah.
really hard. I had one instance once where when I was an airman, I was tasked to work with a staff sergeant that was embarked on the ship. He was the embark officer, and I was part of the Tiger team, is what they called it, of sailors. These were essentially poor performing sailors like myself. Were sent to go work with this Marine and clean spaces and fix them. Like that was my job.
Oh, that sounds horrible.
And it was again not what I anticipated doing, but he sent us into this one storage space that had a leak in it, and it leaked all over these sheets. And he tasked us, me and two other people, with and all the sheets had gotten moldy. He was like, I need you to count these sheets and then refold them and put them back. And I thought this was the most ridiculous thing. And I just straight faced, I said, Staff Sergeant, that's stupid. Worst decision I ever made, because he cleared out the room, locked the hatch, and really gave me my comeuppance. And and then he took me under his wing, and we started PTing in the morning together, and really started that that camaraderie right there, which I think is what kind of gave my affinity for it. But it was because of the leaders that I was able to do as well as I did in the service, so that when I finally picked up E5 and really started to kind of shape what I wanted to do with my career, I wanted to start passing that leadership on to the junior guys. And that's really what my career then became dedicated towards. I became motivated. I wasn't necessarily motivated until I saw the effect that it could have on individuals.
Yeah, because I mean, just thinking about that, when I was a junior sailor, you definitely gravitate towards certain superior or higher ranking petty officers or chiefs and stuff like that have an interest in you, that even it's almost like a big brother effect. That's what I've always, at least from what my experiences were. Like I had a first class that who was from California also, who I just had a lot of similarities with, and he kind of took me under his wing and kind of, the in and outs of what to expect and what to study, what to do to stand out and stuff. And I remember one time he had told me, he said, if they're not talking about you, they're not interested in you. He's like, but he's like, you want to be not to do stupid stuff necessarily per se, but to stand out, have them talking about you because you're showing up 15 minutes early, 10 minutes early to muster. Your boots are super shiny. You got that spit polish on them, the spit shine polish. Your stations are super clean. Your brass is all shined up. Your hair's in regs and no 5 o'clock shadow, which was impossible for me to ever not have. It seemed like, but I think it's really important, because I never got to that position where I was like an E5 training anybody. But I mean, I can only imagine there's individuals that now maybe out of the military or maybe still in, that you trained and they have that type of relationship with you. Even I'm not sure if you still have relationships with that with people that you've trained, but I can only imagine for yourself, you've had those individuals after a class saying like, "Hey, thank you, you know, hey Officer Mayberry for the help today," and like drawing real interest in what you're teaching, because a lot of people will blow it off and be like, "Oh, I'll figure it out," you know.
Yeah. There was one, and it gave me chicken skins just even thinking about it, because you kind of called it out. So talk about an interesting career. I ended up going and becoming an independent duty corpsman. One of my supervisors was like, "Hey, I think this will be a really good job for you." I don't know if you're familiar with what that job is, but we essentially practice medicine with the indirect supervision of a physician. So they sign off on all our notes, but we do the diagnosis and treating from remote locations. And when I was there, when I was graduating the school, I actually selected orders right back to the command that I had just left. There were some extenuating circumstances with a classmate of mine, and there was two job openings open, and I was given the option to select them. And so I asked him, I was like, "What's going to be best for your life situation right now?" And he said, "Hey, staying in California is what's going to help me right now." And so I said, "Okay." I went back to Hawaii, and within my first week of being back, I was walking back to my office, and a Marine had stopped me in the sick hall area, and he said, "Hey, you were the guy that used to teach combat lifesavers up in the classroom over there, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's me. Me and a couple of my buddies, we used to teach that class." And he goes, "My best friend's alive because of what you taught me."
Oh wow.
And like it was very impactful, and I encouraged him. I was like, you put in the dedication, but I was glad to be a resource for you. But like having that feedback, I don't know many people that are ever able to get that opportunity, but like I always encourage people, if they have an opportunity to reach back to somebody that they've that's impacted their life and just tell them what they've done for them. It serves as this catalyst to it changed my life and my perception on what I was doing at that time. To hear that feedback from him, and yeah, it was very motivating that morning to have that be a callback.
I can only imagine too, because I mean, if you're doing that every day, I'm sure there's sometimes it's just becoming repetitious. Now you're just doing it. It's like, okay, this is my job. I'm teaching everybody today, but to have that, yeah, that feedback, and I can't even imagine how that would feel knowing that something you taught somebody. Obviously, like you said, they had to be an avid listener, really pay attention and absorb what you're teaching them. But to apply it, something you taught somebody to a real life situation, not like you taught somebody how to drive, but you taught somebody how to save somebody's life in a combat zone, which is, I mean, how many people get to say they've done that? Like you were saying, it's, I mean, very impressive, and especially just from hearing where you started and to where you got in that period of time, from when you enlisted and you were E5 and you're training individuals. That's it's a very unique story. Not many, I'm sure, stories are out there like that, where they're sailors or whatever branch military you're in, you're kind of like job lost. You're not really in any specific rate or MOS. You're kind of just sitting there, and then find success, training individuals, kind of finding your groove and something you're really passionate about, and applying it, I mean, is super rare.
It was. I was really fortunate with that first command, and I'll tell you, I don't tell many people, but my first eval in the Navy was a 2-0. I had a significant problems eval as my first eval, and when the command saw a sailor like myself, and I, what's crazy was that was the same year that I was also put up for Blue Jacket of the Quarter, one of the quarters. And I still got a significant problems eval because of the stuff that I was doing, the stuff that I was letting affect me at that time. And by the time I hit my 7-year mark, I was already a first class.
Wow.
So within 5 years of becoming a corpsman, like I picked up E6, and a lot of my friends had their discrepancies with how they thought I was, but like I just learned how to listen to those above me, trust that what they're asking me to do is in my best interest, um, because I had no clue, what the right steps were. But if a second class, first class, I mean, even with the Marine Corps, like if a third class asked me to do something, I would do it. If they were
Mhm.
senior to me, I would do it. And people would say, "Oh, that's brown nosing and stuff like that." I'm like, "No, that's military bearing. That's
Yeah.
doing what you're asked," which is like just the very basic of what we're taught in boot camp. Do what you're told to do.
Exactly. I'm just thinking some of the supervisor I had. Yeah, if I were to talk back to him, I can only imagine what would happen if I would have done that. Because I mean, you hear stories now. I have some E5s I served with are now chiefs and stuff, and I still
Mhm.
talk to a few of them, hearing how the Navy is now. I'm just like, wow, this is feel kind of bad for him because it sounds like it's gotten to the point where they do talk back a little bit more. He's like, man, these one of my buddies. He's
Mm.
like, "Yeah, these new guys. He's like, they don't really hold back. If they don't like something, they'll just tell you, I'm not going to do it. It's like, oh man. I was like,
Mm.
there's no way that would have worked because like you said, boot camp was like really engraved. I had a all male division in boot camp. We had a chief, first class,
Mm.
and second class, and it was very tight by the book. Um, I'm happy it was like that because I feel like it's really stuck with me even as an adult. Some of those traits, but like
Mhm.
our chief was just like no cereal at chow. And when they'd come by with the little food cart, he's like, "Don't grab anything off the food cart. No sugars, just whatever's cooked and a thing of water. That's all you need." And it's probably the
Mhm.
best shape I've ever been in my life was at boot camp. I've never ran a mile and a half so fast. It's like, man, if I didn't have that, I mean, and then that's how the military seemed to me. That's my mindset when I got to my carrier. I was on the Nimitz, and is
Mm.
like, okay, I'm coming here, and I'm just going to do what they tell me to do. It's
Mhm.
and like it's. I never got. Well, I'm not gonna say I didn't get in trouble. There's a few times where a couple of us kind of got lucky, but at the same time, I've noticed or I realized at some points looking back when you do those things that your superiors ask of you, especially in the military, when you do, they'll let you slide on certain things. Like there's a few times like we missed the phone call when we're overseas, the check in if we had overnight liberty,
Mm.
and
Okay.
we'd call in a little bit later, and like the E5 or E6 who's working uh, duty that day, he'll be like, "Oh, I already checked you guys." He's like, "I know you guys are good." So it's like, oh,
Mhm.
cool, because we built that relationship, that trust. Like, hey, when they're here though, they work. Like they don't BS around. And
Right.
I think that's one of those skills that really does translate actually into the civilian world of things is what I try to tell people when I was a project manager specifically is like, you know, just do your job. Like just come in here and if there's extra tasks that you need to do, you do it, but your
Mhm.
main priority is just okay. This is what I got to do every single day. Just knock it out. Don't complain about because everybody's going to complain. There's always people that complain, but they also don't do anything, so they just complain all day, and then they come back the next day. Well, oh, this didn't happen, and they're still complaining. It's like just do your job. Life's that
Mhm.
simple to me. At least that's what the military has taught me. It's if you just do what you need to do, and sometimes when the chance arises, take the extra step, go the extra mile on certain things. You
Mhm.
stand out, and those opportunities become endless for you. I'm sure you realize when you were in, even to this day, it's like if you show a little bit of um, grit, determination, some goals, like you're trying to get somewhere, other people
Mhm.
recognize that, especially managers, supervisors, higher ranking officers, chiefs, whatever it may be. Now they're interested in you because they're like, oh, okay, that person's motivated, that person's dedicated, they got
Yep.
discipline. Where and it gets hard to stand out, especially I'm sure if you have a large group of individuals in your division, you can have some divisions can have like 400 people in there. So 40 people, 50
Mm.
people, whatever it is, how do you stand out? And that's the way to do it, I believe. So, um,
Yeah, I mean, it's very like life in general is very simple, but that doesn't make it easy, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, true. Very true. But I mean, some of those things I've learned in the military have made things easier. Like I don't stress about the small stuff as much.
Hmm.
As I think I would if I hadn't experienced some of the stuff I went through when I was in the military, as I'm sure you
Right.
can relate to. You know, there's sometimes like I got told that the other day. They're like, "You're very even keeled." And I was like, "Well, like I've gone through a lot worse than the truck broke down today. You know, it's
Yeah.
okay. I'll make the call and just say, hey, we'll try to go out there tomorrow." I've gone through a lot worse than that. So, yeah, I think that translation, or like when I talk to somebody who was never in the military, they don't fully grasp that. They're like, man, that's just insane. But I was also
Yeah.
going to ask you then too, since because you progress so quickly in in your military career, I'm guessing you're making rate or rank each time your first time up. So what led to you leaving the military then, or leaving the Navy?
So I did my third deployment in 2010 with the same unit back to Afghanistan as an independent duty corpsman. So I got to I actually got to be behind the lines for that deployment. It was very enlightening to watch junior guys go through a lot of the experiences that I did and be there for them in the best way that I could. And when we got back from that deployment, I started having anxiety attacks during training, and I got very concerned because we were getting ready for another deployment back to Afghanistan, and I didn't want to be a liability.
Hmm.
And so I started talking to my doctors in the unit, just letting them know what was going on. They're like, "All right, well, let's just monitor it, see what's going on." And about 5 months later, um, I went into the fridge to grab a beer and saw that I had almost drank in the entire case that I bought the night before, and went for a drive with my wife. Um, and neither one of us batted an eye at the fact like that I had been drinking all day, and I got really concerned for myself that I was drinking too much. It
Hmm.
was just something that I was just like, this isn't good. This isn't normal. The anxiety attacks, the heavy alcohol consumption, um, just wasn't really flowing with what I had with my life, because at the time I was also running triathlons and preparing for marathons, and
Oh wow.
working really hard, doing workups. Like the drinking and the anxiety attacks and panic attacks, flashbacks, whatever you want to call them, just wasn't coinciding with where I wanted to go, and I got really concerned with losing my wife, losing my career because an incident occurred, as well as being a liability to my unit. So I went and I talked to the battalion surgeon, and I said, "Hey, this is going on, and I'm afraid that it's going to escalate to here, because part of my early career, what led to that significant problems eval was I was showing up to work drunk pretty regularly. Drinking was very much kind of acceptable, and I would be out with my friends until 3 4 a.m. drinking, and then report to duty at 6 a.m. I'd put on my uniform, when I got back to the ship, shave everything, and then go sleep in the workstation until it was muster. Um, and that was what caused me to really perform really poorly. Like I had nothing to do. We were in the shipyards, and this was the actions that I was doing. Um,
Wow.
uh, and then to further that part of my early career, um, I suffered a breakup at that time, and it was devastating to a 19-year-old boy has a drinking problem, um, and no real motivation to do his job. I put a gun under my chin, um,
Oh.
and I don't know what happened to snap me out of that uh, that moment, but a second class that had always been kind to me and always been motivating came to mind, and he was on duty that night as well. And so I secured the weapon, and I went and I told him what happened. Um, And I was afraid that that's where my life was heading again in terms of alcohol consumption. And I didn't want to end up there. So when I asked for help, I went, they suggested that I go talk to an alcohol counselor on base. And so I said, okay, like I can do that. I can go talk to them, let them know what's going on. Showed up there. He said, hey, fill out these forms. And when I read the questions on their forms, again, they were very simple questions that were laid out about drinking and PTSD, but they were the hardest things for me to answer. But I answered them honestly. And when I answered them and they did the review, they suggested that I go to inpatient treatment for alcohol abuse, and said that I might be suffering from PTSD as well. Wow. And being the medical profession that I am, and being the guy that says, okay, like, tell me what I need to do, I will do it, and I will fix myself, or I will get better, and I will do this. I agreed to do what the doctor suggested, and I let my command know. And they said, hey, we already know what's going on. You've got our permission. You got our blessing. They sent me off really well. If any of those guys are listening now, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to non-tearfully say goodbye, because it was the most heartbreaking thing. Because for sailors attached to Marines, when we get put on limited duty, which was I was getting put on limited duty to deal with this issue, we get separated from our unit. They were going to continue on with their deployment, and I was going to stay back, and I had to change commands and take care of this issue. And while I was in treatment, they gave me the news that I might most likely be medically separated. And again, it happened very quickly. This was over a decade ago when all of this was going on. This was 2011, and from what I've now learning is these things have changed. They're treating PTSD earlier. They're getting guys back out onto the battlefield. Like it's no longer as detrimental to a career as it once was, because back then they were just starting to really treat it more aggressively, and take it a bit more seriously. But now they've learned, hey, early intervention is the best medicine for this. And for me, when I came back in 2006, which is where the majority of my flashbacks were coming from, I hid it. I didn't tell anybody what was going on. My wife at the time recognized what was happening, and we just kind of agreed, like, hey, we just won't go out to these things. We'll avoid crowded areas. We'll have people over to the house instead of going to bars. Like it's going to be okay. These things will pass. And and I believed it, and I did deploy for 4 years because of what my command they gave me time to heal, recuperate, even gave me an opportunity to change my job. And I really thought things were good. Like you said, I was picking up, I picked up meritoriously twice, one through meritorious advancement and one through school. So that was the E5 and the E6. So like my career was going really well. Life was going really well, fitness and stuff like that. And so, as I had to sit there and adjust to the idea that I was going to be medically separated, I called up my dad and I said, hey, like, this is going on. This is the news that they're giving me. And what do you think I should do? And he was, one, shocked that I had a problem with alcohol. It wasn't something that anybody in my family had ever brought up to me about me drinking too much or anything like that, to include my wife at the time. He was just like, I had no idea that you were having this difficulty, but if they're going to be separating you, or if this career path isn't something that's going to be good for your health overall, I think you should get back into the arts. I think you should get back into acting. And that's what I started to pursue.
Wow. There's a lot there, and it's just insane because it's one of those things you never really hear about, like PTSD for folks that are still in the military or still active. It's always post service where these things, it's more brought to light. And like you said, they didn't really have anything back then. I got out in 2011 as well, the Navy, and there wasn't really there really wasn't anything out there.
Yeah.
You're in the military, next day you're out, and it's like, all right, good luck, see you later. And it's changed a lot. I think, like you're saying, it's progressed really quickly. I'd say like the last 5 years, it's really picked up. It's
Yeah.
because people are starting to realize, like, okay, the homeless rates for veterans are going through the roof. Um, all these issues, alcoholism, drugs, and it's kind of always gone unchecked. But you never really. This is the first time I've heard anybody experiencing that while they're still active. And I was just thinking, even like you said, you get separated from your unit. I'm sure that didn't help at the time as well, because you're battling this PTSD, and that unit probably has a lot of trust in you and them. So now
Hmm.
I'm not sure how you felt, they're going off to Afghanistan without you, and I'm sure they're probably even thinking like, holy crap, this sucks. Like, Mayberry's our boy, that's our guy, and he's not here. So I'm sure that didn't help as well. That probably piled onto some of those emotions you were going through at the time as well.
Yeah,
But
that transition out definitely hurt. The chief at the time, who just a stellar chief, master chief now. Um, he uh, he was so encouraging, so supportive, and honestly, like, had I not taken those steps, um, my life probably would have ended up a lot worse. Just because I would have continued to avoid those symptoms, and I probably would have gotten deeper into addiction. The alcoholism at the time would have gotten worse. I mean, um, it really made me look at my life and say, what is it that I want to do? I fell into medicine. I tell people all the time, like, medicine was never like a life goal of mine. It was just something that I happened to be good at and enjoy. And like, it was very black and white. I could kind of see and figure things out, and it worked for my logical mind. A lot of people are like that with different things. I watch mechanics, and they can just kind of understand what's happening with the car. Like, I can understand what's happening with a person's body because it makes sense to me. Um, but it was definitely never like, oh, long-term career in medicine. And so
mhm.
at that time, I was 29 years old. Yeah, it's like 20. No, I was 27 years old at the time. Um, and I was like, I have an opportunity to really explore again. What do I want to do? And the really amazing part was, I had 2 years to work through that transition. Not many people get 2 years to work their military exit. I was
Yeah.
I was sent TAD to a clinic, and they were more than happy to have a first class IDC at their command that didn't count against their numbers. And so, like, I was a great helping hand, and they were fine with me just being a TAD person while I worked my way out of the military and went through the medical process. Um, and like, I had a lot of lofty goals and plenty of time to prepare for them.
Yeah, that's very lucky. I mean, but kind of like, even going back a little bit, I mean, kudos to you even to realize you had a problem in the moment, um, because I think that's, from a lot of the veterans I've spoken to so far. I think this is the 19th episode, but the
Mm,
first few weren't veteran driven. Um,
mm,
but I've heard that from ever since I started talking to veterans. It seems like that's the first initial, I don't want to say escape, but it's like, I'm trying to think of the right word, but it's the coping mechanism, the
mm-hmm.
the liquid, the alcohol. It kind of, I think it, what people think, I know I did when I, maybe not even like really thought about, but like subconsciously you reach for that bottle and you're thinking, okay, this is going to suppress everything, I'll feel better. But it really makes things worse, because you just really start getting in your own head. For those who haven't
Mm-hmm.
experienced that, you think it's going to help you escape what you're feeling, what you're thinking. And I think the hardest thing for most veterans that go through or have those issues when they get out or while they're in is this between the ears. I mean, dealing with between the ears is the hardest part of everything, because when you do have those times where, I mean, you could be driving somewhere by yourself and you're thinking like, all these negative thoughts, and you get home, like you said, you only have one beer left after you bought a case yesterday. I know I've been there. It's not fun. I
It's
know a lot of
common, right?
yeah, and a lot of people think that you're like, "Oh, you're having a good time." It's like, no, a lot of that's kind of by yourself too, which is doesn't help the situation too. I've been in that was how it was for me at least. Like I would when I first got out of the Navy, I never went to school. I got out a month early so I could go to college
Mm.
on time for that spring. And man, I almost failed out of college. I had like a 1 point something GPA. I never went, and I would just sit at the house or in our studio apartment, and I would just drink all day. Just sit there from like maybe 8 in the morning to like noon, just drinking. And it's very hard to escape that. And it takes to that's why I applaud you to even acknowledge that and the courage to even tell your dad, because that's one of the most intimidating parts when you're going through those types of deals is to make that call to talk to somebody in your family, because the burden you don't want to put on them because now they're nervous about yourself.
So one of when we're talking about like the alcoholism and stuff and me self-identifying, um, and my brother knows this. My older brother is the biggest influence that I've had in my life. Uh, taught me so much. I didn't grow up in a house with my dad, so whenever my older brother, who's 7 years older than me, was around, I wanted to be with him. I spent all my time with him. He was the guy that I looked up to. And when he got out of the military, and even while he was in the military, alcohol abuse was at least at that time, was very rampant in the ranks. I'm sure not much has changed in those regards from what I hear. And when I talk about alcohol abuse, I'm not talking about like the negative things of alcohol, but like drinking to get blackout drunk is just a very common thing, especially amongst young people that are grouped together that
Hmm.
are away from home from the first time. Like it's a college thing, it's a young person thing, and unfortunately, like that's the reality for a lot of people is they fall into that habit of binge drinking, um, and they don't realize like in the moment that you may be on the extreme end of that. When I stopped drinking, I realized just how extreme I was on it, especially when I talked about it with my older brother. But to bring it back to him, he continued to abuse alcohol well into his 20s and suffered a lot of negative consequences. And so, they talk about a wise person learning from the mistakes or learning from the experiences of another person. And I learned a lot from his experiences of what to do and what not to do. And so when I thought that there was even a possibility that I was abusing alcohol, um, I wanted to address it because I didn't want to experience any of the negative consequences that comes along with that. And I knew I was very much at risk. I got out of a few DUIs just probably by the skin of my teeth. Even having a couple of shots at lunch. Not many people have shots at lunch, and
Oh
it
yeah,
wasn't something
yeah.
I would do during the workday. Like I didn't drink during the workday. I only drank when I got home or when I was off or when I thought about it and I didn't have any other responsibilities. And it really became like an obsessive thing in my mind when I was off of like, when can I drink? I started signing up for races that served alcohol. Because like I wanted the opportunity to get drunk with other people doing something that I enjoyed doing as well. Um,
Wow.
like bars were no longer an option. So like day drinking became a thing. And at that time, like I was just like, I didn't realize it because everything else was going really well. My wife at the time didn't realize it. I mean, when I told her I was in rehab, because she had actually just joined the Navy, right before I went to inpatient treatment for alcohol, and so she had no clue I was going through this. And when I asked her afterwards, I was like, "Hey, so what'd you what was your response when you received that letter in boot camp that I was in rehab?" And she goes, "I knew you were going to take care of it." She goes, I wasn't worried one bit. If there was a problem, you were going to address it. And that's what I did, and I got to celebrate 11 years of sobriety last June, because like alcohol is still something that I don't want to affect my life. I don't want it to have that negative impact that it could potentially have. Plus, it also just doesn't serve any of the goals that I currently have. Like having a
Yeah.
drink with people, just I go hang out with people that are drinking. No problem. If they get drunk, I excuse myself because like the drunkenness is annoying, and I'm like, I used to probably be 10 times worse than that. So cool.
Yeah, like when you stop drinking, like I still drink occasionally, but not nearly as much. I'll go like weeks sometimes, or maybe in a couple of months without even having one. Then when I do, it's like kind of like you were saying, I'm like, wow, that doesn't taste as good, even as I had
Mhm.
anticipated it to taste. But
Right.
because I mean, for me, kind of like you were saying with your wife at the time, um, like things were going good. I got out of the Navy. I was going to college.
Mhm.
After I almost flunked. I really took school seriously. I started my GPA. I was on dean's list after that. I was killing it. I was like, oh, this is nice. But
Mm.
the college I went to had a bar on campus, so I purposely scheduled my last class like 2 hours before or after the one before. So I'd go in there and
Mm.
they do like tap takeovers. I'd be sitting there reading my books and or starting writing my essay for whenever that was due, and I'd be
Mhm.
drinking. And I'd sit in there sometimes and have in that 2 hour span maybe like 4 or 5 beers, like legit pints.
Mm.
And I lived about 2 hours away, so I'd have to drive home after what I can't remember how long a college class is, but like an hour or so.
Mhm.
So it's like no time to sober up, not drinking any water. And
Mhm.
there were some times, and this is in my mid late 20s, where I started to realize like, man, I can function like this, and that's kind of alarming. Like I'm starting to drink a whole lot of beer, and I'm driving around like
Yeah.
perfectly fine. That's kind of scary. And if I were to get pulled over, a cop's gonna be like, "Holy crap, dude! Like, how are you even functioning right now?" And
Yeah.
yeah, until recently, for myself, I'd say like the last year and a half or so, really had that moment too, where I was like, "All right, I just need to stop." Like, this is getting
Yeah.
to the point where, especially when COVID hit and I was working from home primarily, it's like, all right, man, I was cracking a beer open at 11 o'clock in the morning, and it's like this is ridiculous. I remember like even my wife, she caught on to it because I like try to hide it. She's like, "Why are you hiding it?" She's like, it's like that's when I was like, I'm ashamed. That's why. It's super
Mm.
embarrassing. But yeah, once you can control it, and like I said, like the beer I had the other day, I cracked it open. I was like, man, this does not taste. This is not craving or satisfying that craving of like it's hot outside. I just want to sit back and drink something.
Yeah.
But every time I've had those cravings, I've got like a glass of water or orange juice or something. I like, all right, I'm just not touching it. Hardly ever buy it, if that, and it's for those who are going through those experiences, I would encourage yourself to like really look at yourself in the mirror, because that's what I did for myself. I'm sure you did something similar. I was just like, what am I
Yep.
doing? Like I really sat there and I just looked at myself like, what in the world am I doing right now? This is just ruining everything. If I have to go out of my way to get something to feel a certain way, and it's damaging my body, relationships, like it's just not.
Mhm.
And your work on top of that, when you have a family and stuff like that to provide for, it's not a
Yeah.
wise decision. um
Yeah, and for anybody that's ever curious about like whether or not they might have a problem with drinking, not to say you're an alcoholic, but a problem with drinking,
mhm.
and my supervisors at the time just said, go home and try not to drink, and then try not to do it the next day, and like see how long that goes. And what I learned was just like the idea that I have to think about not drinking is a problem. Um,
Yeah.
tolerance is I feel like one of those first signs that you've probably been drinking a little bit too much because like your
Mhm.
body is now used to metabolizing it. And I think, the way that I look at it now is if something isn't serving a purpose for me in my life, or the life of my family, I don't necessarily need to embark upon it. I mean, I still have a problem putting the fork down, and keeping sweets out of my mouth, but like I know why I do it.
Oh yeah. I can agree with that. I totally understand what you mean with that. Uh, and it's funny about it all. Like I was just thinking too, when it comes to not even just alcohol, but like things that we know are bad for us, especially folks that have been in the military or are in the military. It's like we're typically very disciplined as a whole. That's just a kind of a blanket, I guess, assumption, But
Mhm.
typically very disciplined and motivated. I mean, to join the military at any age, you have to have some type of motivation to do it, some type of dedication or discipline, and then to let something control you is actually quite remarkable that it happens. I think because
Mhm.
we go through boot camp and we're almost like kind of programmed to think a certain way, act a certain way, and then to let something from the outside kind of dictate how you're going to operate and function day to day. It's
Yeah.
kind of alarming, and it on a number of different levels, but just it's just baffling me now. Just think about. I've never really thought about it like that, but how like yourself, hearing how disciplined you were in your time of service, your training folks, or one person, uh, former Marine came up to you and said that what you taught him saved somebody that in combat, and then to have something such like that you go out your way to buy something so simple, simplistic as alcohol, kind of control your day to day.
Mhm.
It's insane. I mean, how it does that, and that's why I think you do see these numbers continuously growing for veterans. I know now women veterans are becoming like a huge study as well. Just the amount of women veterans are now homeless. I think that's higher than men statistically. Last time I
Yeah.
checked, and
On
it's
the like, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, like with alcohol specifically, like the crazy part is when we're looking at those statistics of homelessness, suicide, and especially suicide, and then we look at like alcohol's role in this.
Hmm.
Alcohol is a depressant, like that's what it does to the body. It makes you lethargic, makes you slower to think, and then it also reduces your ability to control your impulses. A sober mind has a better chance of staying alive than something that is completely intoxicated. Um, and you know, the fact that it's not just combat veterans that experience hardships. A lot of veterans that I know, myself included, we come from very rough upbringings. We come from very unstable homes and childhood trauma that is left untreated or even was treated at one point,
Mm.
like that forms a scar tissue that makes us more susceptible to developing serious mental health conditions like suicidal ideations, depressions, anxieties, anger management issues. And so we already have those things that we have to deal with regardless of whether or not we experience combat. And then you go and you throw a depressant into the mix, um, and then you throw in its ability to lower our inhibitions to do reckless things. It's a recipe for disaster. Like I've been sober for 11 years, and 3 years ago, um, life was going really, really, really well. Our business was growing. I was halfway through my master's program. Um, my wife was producing a television show. We were very active in our church. I still maintain connections with people that I'm sober with, so that community is really important to me. And my wife and I were invited to a friend's child's 1 year birthday party, and I just didn't feel like going. Like that was it. I just didn't want to go to the birthday party. I wanted to stay home and relax because I had just a long week. Like that's pretty typical. And so
Yeah.
she said, "Okay, no problem. Like let me drop you off at home, and then I'll go on." And I said, "Okay." And I went upstairs, and that night I started planning my death for the first time in 8 years. Um,
Wow.
and I knew all of the tools that I had been learning to that point, right? Like the physical exercise, um, the meditation, don't introduce substances, call the hotline if needed, stay active in my community, that kind of stuff. Like I knew all those tools. Those are all the tools that they teach us. And I was practicing them all. Meditation is one that I don't do great. I still struggle with like slowing down and just appreciating the moment. But like that night I was just like, okay. And I really thoroughly planned out what was going to happen in the next couple of days. And I went to bed that night, like really concerned. I didn't talk to my wife because I felt really ashamed for having those thoughts, because I had been so on top of it for so long, about even just admitting when I was feeling like I didn't want to exist anymore. And so the fact that it had progressed into planning so quickly and just seemingly on a whim, I was just really ashamed to admit it that night. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll go to bed. If I go to bed, maybe I'm just tired. Maybe I'm just hungry. So I ate a little something, went to bed, woke up in the morning, went to go volunteer at church, went to church, but the thoughts were still there and I was still planning. And it was the wildest thing. Like they wouldn't leave me alone. And so after we got home from church, it was Super Bowl Sunday. I told my wife, I was like, this is what's happened this weekend. I started planning my death. And it was the first time I ever told her that. Like I had told her, like, hey, I am feeling really depressed right now. Like I don't feel any loving emotions for you, but just know that I do love you. Know that I know that you love me, but like, this is just something that I'm going through. But this was the first time I ever told her, like, I've planned how I'm going to die this weekend. And that scares me because I haven't had these feelings for over 8 years. And immediately, like, I just felt better. A weight was lifted, the thoughts dispersed. And the scripture that I believe in talks about the enemy hiding in the darkness, and he can't hide in areas where we shine light. So when we do share stuff like that with our community, you're no longer ashamed of it. It's no longer a thought that has power over you, because it's been released. And I had practiced telling those truths to my community for so long. Now introduce alcohol into that situation.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't have told my wife. I might not have even planned to do it later that week. I might have that night done something while she was away and I was alone, because the alcohol lowering my impulse control, and making me more depressed. Like, I know there's a lot of veterans that struggle with the thoughts that I struggle with, and not even struggle. Like I just work through them. I can't even call it a struggle. It's I have these thoughts and that's okay. Because I know how to battle them. I know how to work through them. Like I've been equipped through the resources available to veterans, to be able to overcome suicidal ideations, at least to this point. I mean, I've been doing it now for 11 years and I'm active in it. Right. I have a full life. I have a full education, a great career, a great wife. And like, I just can't imagine bringing in something that is going to disrupt that and make it easier for me to give up to a temporary circumstance, make a permanent decision based off of a temporary circumstance. And that's what alcohol makes us do.
100%. Like, for me, it was about like 3 years ago as well when I did something similar. Like I had, kind of did the same thing. I actually, it was a text message. I texted myself, like kind of like a farewell type letter or text message. It's about 3 years ago, and same. But I had alcohol. I was drinking at the time, and I was just really down on myself. I was at my desk, my work desk, and I was like, man, this is just like, kind of like you said, it just came on me like that in that moment. And then you have alcohol and kind of feeding the beast, so to speak, And I never told my wife, but I had texted my brother or talked to my older brother. He's 6 years older than me. And I had told him, I was like, this is what, like, I didn't show him my text, but I told him, I was like, man, I'm thinking about having like these thoughts about like, killing myself. And And he just told me, like, dude, you got a lot to live for, you know. He's like, get those thoughts out of your head. You know, you got wife, you got kids, or at the time just my son. But he's like, you got things going on in your life. Be happy. You know, you're in a good spot.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and he kind of reconfirmed. No, he's like, I'm proud of you. He's like, you've done a lot in your life, and it did feel good. It felt like a sense of relief. It wasn't something I told my wife till just recently, that I had that moment, because I felt ashamed, kind of like you were saying. It's hard to when you slept on it, and I felt really guilty and ashamed that I was having those thoughts, because kind of like you were saying, you know, I've had this good life after military. It took a while to get here, but you know, we both graduated. She went to college before I did, but um, got college out of the way. We got a house. We got all these things. We're killing it with our careers, and at the same time, it's like, why am I having these thoughts? So, like, that's where
Mm-hmm.
I totally understand what you're saying. It's like, why do you have these thoughts? Like, everything's going so good. Like, why is this happening?
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of reminds me. I was actually listening to this podcast today when I was driving home. The guest was, I think his name was Beckley. On this, I'll shoot you the podcast too. This episode
Okay.
specifically was kind of talking about what you were kind of about this conversation. Like, he got out of the Marine Corps, and he was saying, you know, his life was going good. He was an officer in the Marine Corps, so he had all these job offers. He was working for, I think, a bank, and he's making all this money, and he still struggled mentally with all these different issues. But he kind of did
Mm-hmm.
the um, um, started like like reflecting and diving into himself, meditating. Something I never thought about till today, hearing that, and then I heard you say that as well. Um, Definitely something I think I want to try. Just kind of because sounds. I know a lot of people are like, when I first heard it, I was like, oh man, that sounds like, who meditates? Like, what the heck? But it sounds like, you know, it has like that weird stigma around it. But I was like, maybe it's kind
Right.
of good to just sit there, quiet, self-reflect, breathe in and out, just let things go. Because
You know,
I'm kind of under the impression now. Sorry, kind of under the impression now. You know, as veterans, and I'm sure other individuals in the military or other services, those thoughts kind of will always come back every so often, no matter how good things are going. It could
mm-hmm.
be 3 years, it could be 8 years, it could be a week. You know, you might think you're done with it, but I think there's always that time, um, where you kind of shut off. Like you say, you kind of, like you told your wife, hey, it's not that I'm not in love with you right now. I'm just dealing with something internally, because that does happen to me. I'm sure it happens to a lot of veterans, where it just like comes out of nowhere sometimes, and
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to navigate it. And the older you get, and if you're not partaking in any substances that may deter you from or enhance that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
you can navigate it a lot easier. That's what I've come to learn, not drinking as much, nearly as much. It's like, man, I can
Yeah.
navigate these issues and these mental, like, things going on a lot better than I was at 25 years old, you know?
Oh yeah,
So,
it's absolutely incredible. And you know, and the meditation thing, it's really funny because like meditation is almost like this new age, you know, Eastern philosophy type of stuff. Honestly, like I've learned that meditation is literally just prayer, but you're
mhm,
listening prayer, right? Like you're listening for um, like like how many people say, oh, we're gonna pray about that, right? Like that's a very common expression, at least that I hear in the circles that I run with. And a lot of people, when they pray, they're doing a lot of talking and a lot of asking, but they're not also listening to the person that they're talking to. And that's all that meditation is you're listening to that person that you would be talking to, or that being that you would be talking to say, hey, feed me, right? Like tell me the stuff that I'm supposed to hear. And when those negative thoughts arise, like we could acknowledge that those negative thoughts are there, and that's a part of where our mind is at. But then we don't have to sit there and dwell on it. We can move past them. And that's what like meditation gives us the opportunity to do, is say, hey, I don't feel like being around today. Okay, I acknowledge that I don't feel like being around today. Why is that? And then we're just going to move forward, right? Like, and
mhm,
it takes practice. I really admire my wife. She's able to, I feel like she's been meditating almost daily for the last 4 years, and she's extended her time. But when we first started talking about the necessity of meditation in our daily lives, um, she was very much like me. Like, I still can't shut my brain off, and it's frustrating.
Yeah.
You know, but most mornings I do wake up, and the first thing that I think about is how grateful I am to be able to take in a deep breath and hear the environment around me, and be laying next to somebody that I love, be a part of a community that I care about. And then I just lay there and I take, I take 5 to 10 minutes of trying not to think or fall back asleep. Sometimes I fall back asleep, and that's okay, but it's a great way for me to start my morning with some clarity. When I jump out of bed and I immediately get going, um, it's usually a little bit rougher of a day to get through, because I didn't take that moment to just be like, it's a good day to be alive.
And it sounds like it's another tool to have to like combat those thoughts, because they do come back. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, you were 8 years sober, 8 years out of the military, and it still happened. So I mean, I'm sure there'll be another time when you have that thought again. Unfortunately, I feel like, I honestly believe it's just one of those things you're always going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
But as you get older and you do these different things, now you have more tools to rely on to navigate that, like you were saying.
And
So,
and that's and that incident was kind of like the catalyst for the podcast that I'm launching, the 1 Mile 1 Veteran,
mhm.
because those tools are like, these thoughts, from what I've been told, are always going to be with us. They're always going to be with me. However, utilizing these tools makes them less severe, less drastic, more manageable, and eventually, like, it'll just become routine in my life. A lot of the times, like, the things that I'm supposed to do are routine. It's when I start falling off that bandwagon and stop taking care of the things that that we're going to talk about on our podcast, the 5 different main areas of health that people should be considering in their life, is a lot of what we're going to talk about. And then we're also going to provide resources of where people can get connected with some of these different pillars. And this is adopted from the VA's whole health model, which really makes the veteran the center of their own care. They say, hey, I want to take care of this. I want my life to look like that. And the VA now is getting to the point where they're like, okay, let's equip you to get there. And so physical health is really, really important when dealing with mental health issues. Our mind is connected to our body. When we have chronic pain, when we have poor eating habits and poor physical fitness, and I'm not saying that you need to be jacked, and I know me and my wife do weird things, like we just ran the Spartan race. Like I still like to run and crazy things that my body will let me do. And I still believe in my head that I'm 20 years old and can do anything I want to do. But like, honestly, something as simple as 20 minutes of light walking each day is enough to get like endorphins flowing, reduce improve mental health, and also just like get your blood flowing to the part where like your heart will be a little bit healthier. Just getting out the door for 20 minutes of just light exercise. Get your heart rate above 120 for 20 minutes each day, and it mentally you will start to feel better. You can always take those thoughts back and say, no, I feel like crap. This 20 minutes is
Yeah.
garbage. Just like you can do with anything. You can eat the most expensive steak and still say it tastes like junk. Um, like what's going on up here? What's your motivation behind why you're doing what you're doing? So physical health is the first pillar. Second pillar is mental health. Whether you're talking to a counselor, a pastor, a friend, you're talking about the stuff that is in your mind, right? Like if you have PTSD, if you suffered sexual trauma, if you ever had they're even finding like people that have been involved in car accidents or near car accidents suffer a form of PTSD, especially if they never
Oh,
talk about it. It can be that
wow.
elusive, especially depending. Like, yeah, it's there's so much study being found, like, that these little things. Everybody went through this pandemic together, whether or not how you adjusted to it. That is going to form a form of PTSD. People
Mm.
are going to have a hard time adjusting to a life and they're going to start feeling certain ways about how they are. We already see it within our community. And medical professionals have been talking about it since 2020 about the mental effect that this is going to have long term on people's stuff. So, dealing with the mental health stuff in a professional or counseling type of way is what we're going to be talking about, as well as the spiritual side. So spiritual side, we're not talking about getting a religion or anything like that. I have a faith. I have a personal religion that I'm a part of. Like I am a proud Christian within my community, and just like one of the fathers, like I wish everybody believed that I believe, but honestly, like find a way to be spiritual, which just means you're finding a purpose that is beyond yourself, that gives your life a little bit more meaning. These are incorporating practices of prayer and listening prayer, like we had talked, but like when we talk about spirituality, we're not the center of the universe. Like if that's news to you, like I'm not the center of the universe. The world does not revolve around me. And so like the sooner that we can realize that, the sooner I can realize like, hey, the guy that just cut me off, he has something going on in his life. I don't know what it is, but he might have something that is actually more important than I have right now. And that's why he cut me off. Like, and that's okay. Like that's an easy trigger, right? Like,
yeah. I live in California, so yeah, that's like you step out the house and you're getting cut off. People,
but like, and yeah, there are definitely bad actors out there, but for the most part, like everybody's the hero in their own story. There is life beyond my four walls, and that's what we talk about with spirituality and how we can help people get to that realm. And we talk about relational health. So that's our community. Whether we're volunteering for an organization, we have a group of friends that we're tight with. It's how to have those healthy relationships, how to define those healthy relationships, even with our spouses, and how they can be a part of our lives in a way that's beneficial mutually. Because again, my marriage isn't about making me happy. My marriage is about having the purpose that we're driving towards together. We agreed it in our foundations when we got married of what our lives were going to look like, and we talk about it regularly of, hey, is this the path that we're still going? And with our friends, we are, it's proven that we are the product of the people that we surround ourselves with. And so if we're surrounding ourselves with people that are drinking and negative and have bad attitudes, we're probably going to be drinking and negative and have bad attitudes. Like I've yet to meet a parent that hangs out with their kid that's probably in like that 5 to 7 age range, who loves like school and everything, and like that parent doesn't necessarily have a smile on their face when they're around that 7-year-old that's like super excited and charged on life. Like if we could all have that 7-year-old mentality of like, this is amazing, we can do anything, I can be a flying astronaut when I grow up that rides a unicorn.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, my 4-year-old who thinks he's gonna be the Flash someday. So,
it's like, hey. Do you break his heart and tell him no, you're not, or do you tell him, hey, let's get you the costume and start running?
Yeah, he's been rocking the costume now for two years. Yeah, I mean, that's a God. Yeah, being a kid is totally different. It's that type of just pure joy day to day is insane compared to when you're an adult and you see it, you're like, man, that must be nice. It's just, how do you get back to that?
Right. And so, it's the community, it's the people that you actually surround yourself with. And some people do need to get cut out of the daily interactions because they're just not good for our mental health. They're not good for us. They're possibly even detrimental. And that's okay. Like they still have a purpose in their community, but maybe not in my life. And then the other aspect is the professional health. And they're finding like we spend, I mean, you said it today, like 4:30 to the start of this interview, you've been working. We spend so much of our life in a profession, and this is where a lot of veterans also struggle with, is finding a profession that means something to you, having a strong why of going in. For some people, it's, hey, I need to put food on the table. And that's a strong why. Like knowing that the job provides for the life that you want for your family is a great why. For me, I don't have kids. My wife and I aren't planning on ever having our own biological children. And so my why is I want to serve a community that I love. I want to serve others in such a healthy and productive way, that like our profession is this. We're changing our lives. We have both decided to leave our current jobs, which are amazing jobs, and our bosses were great to us, to do this full time so that we can go out there and we can spread this message. We could talk about those 5 pillars of health and encourage people to get out there, walk a mile, listen to these stories. There's some amazing people out there that are making it through life, and there's some amazing organizations that are out there to help veterans. And we want to share those with people.
Yeah, I think that is possibly the biggest or the most important thing for a veteran or just anybody in life, to be honest, is find your why. Like I said, I've been listening to a lot of veteran podcasts lately, like just maybe like the last week, 2 weeks, just almost every day, just starting to listen to them. And that's kind of that same thing has been spoken by a number of different veterans I've talked to even. Like one of the ones I was listening to, one of the gentlemen, he was saying, he's like, you got to stop staying up so late. He's like, that's horrible. He's like, go to bed at a good time, get the quality sleep, not just get sleep, get quality sleep. Find your why. He's like, every day, he's like, find something that brings joy to your life. And he's like, it doesn't need, he's like, material things are just material things. And he's like, but being happy, doing something you love is something different. And it's funny because I had told my wife this, but her and I had the same conversation similarly, I guess, a couple weeks ago or maybe a month ago. I was like, all this stuff we got is just stuff, and that's like, it really hit me one day. It's like, this is just stuff. Like all this can go, and the most important things is the 4 of us. If you count our 2 kids, it's like this is what we have. This is our nucleus. Everything else, I mean, TV is a TV. We could always get a new one. So it's like, got to stop stressing the small stuff. Be grateful for what we have. It'd be a lot worse. There are folks out there that have it 100 times worse than we do. Kind of like you're saying, you get cut off on the freeway. Who knows what that person's going through? Maybe somebody in their family got hurt or whatever the case may be. Their wife's going into labor. There's a plethora of things that can be happening. So to be grateful, find your purpose. And that's where I'm still finding your purpose. I think is one of the things I've been working on more so than ever before, or now this last year more than ever before. I've jumped around from job to job. I was in the same field for a number of years, but I jumped from one company to another company. I was like, oh man, I'm just doing the same thing. I'm really good at it, but it's not fulfilling. It's and it was during that process I was still doing that old job as a project manager, and I had that moment where I text myself, that letter basically, and like you're just not finding it. So I mean, now I'm at something new. I'm liking it, but my ultimate goal would be to do something like this, like what we're doing, kind of like what you're going to be doing with your podcast, because I think it brings it's like I was telling somebody, it's like therapeutic. I know it's kind of weird, but talking to other veterans, sharing stories, hearing your story, it's therapeutic because it makes you feel not alone. It's easy to have these conversations with people who have gone through them, and kind of the struggles, even sharing those stories, like those moments you had, like you were saying, you slept on it, told your wife what you're going through, and I'm sure a number of people can relate to that, whether they're married or not, whatever their personal situation is. But reaching out, telling your sister, your brother, your parents, whatever it may be, a friend, it's very hard to do that. It takes a certain like self-awareness to do that stuff. And that's what I love about podcasting with other veterans. I had that same moment. I was like doing ones with my friends from high school. It's like, oh, this is kind of cool. But I had like the why moment with my podcast. Like, why am I doing this? You know, like it's fun, you know, reminisce about high school. But I had spoken to one veteran and it really clicked. I was like, this is what I should be doing. You know,
Yeah.
it's like I always had all this stuff that I've never been able to tell anybody, or I probably should have told somebody, but I never have. And I don't know, maybe I'll tell them and they'll tell me some stuff kind of like we did today. And,
Yes, sir.
and it's refreshing, you know, it's comforting knowing that our community might be small, but it's strong if we're willing to reach out, listen to somebody else. But it's actually taking that first step, you know, I think is the most important part. Like we're like doing something like we're doing, taking that first step, acknowledging, hey, this is what's happening. This is where I want to be. And how do I get there?
Yeah.
So, and it's
absolutely.
I know this is kind of a funny quote, but I've always the movie Point Break. I'm not the original one. I'm sure you've watched.
Okay, which one are you going with?
The original one. I've never watched the newest one, but Patrick Swayze always has a quote in there. I only watched the movie, I swear, for this quote. He said something to Keanu Reeves about surfing. He's like, it's where you lose yourself and you find yourself. And I've always thought, like, man, that's kind of, it's always resonated with me, because he says, oh, that's what he says. Like, you haven't figured out what surfing's all about yet, right? Or something like that along those lines. Yeah, it's where you lose yourself and you find yourself. And I've always kind of tried to apply that to life. Like, you know, if I'm doing this, it's not bringing me joy. It's maybe I'll find something else. I got to find something where I can get lost in doing it. And at the same time, it's bringing me joy and finding myself in it. And that's what I hope your podcast does for you, because I know it's done that for me a whole lot. It's really been kind of that light in dark times, or when I think about those dark times, like, man, that's nice having these moments, you know, they don't come by often where you can openly talk about certain things. So
yeah, you know, up until that incident that happened 3 years ago, I spent a lot of time avoiding the military community, the veteran community, because I had a 30-year plan in the service, and I for a long time just missed it, right? Like I missed the camaraderie. It hurt when I was around it. And I wanted to be able to be 100% focused on not living in the past, but living in the present and looking forward and moving forward. And that's what I would do. You know, and I had worked for the VA for just over a year, doing public affairs with them, doing visual information public affairs work with them, and got to meet a lot of amazing people in the year prior to that. But since we've decided to move forward with one mile, one veteran, which is going to be expanding, you know, beyond the podcast, there's going to be a lot of stuff that comes along with it over the years as we grow. What it has kind of pushed me to do this past year, since COVID restrictions in Hawaii have loosened up a lot more, we can travel a little bit better and go to different places without having to be concerned about the health of everybody around us. It's allowed me to link up with different veteran service organizations and start getting back connected with veterans. It was really amazing. Last month, I had an opportunity to go to a retreat in Pennsylvania, and the majority of the people there were Marine Corps veterans, and the leader of the camp had known that I was, or the leader of the retreat knew that I was a corpsman, and Marines call their corpsman Doc, and it was something that, you know, it was something that when I worked around other veterans and then when I worked for the Navy in a public affairs capacity last year, the most recent job, I worked with sailors, and they don't really they don't say that, and I don't go around telling people like, oh yeah, I was a doc, like this is what I did. You know, they ask, I'm like, yeah, I was with the Marines. You know, they're like, oh, what branch? Navy. Okay, and they picture a ship, and then I'm like, but I'm not that Navy. Sorry, guys. Like, and so when I went to this retreat, and they immediately knew they knew my career. They knew what I did without me ever having to say a thing. And it was wild. It was like I was missing a part of me for a very long time. And I actually got to like grieve the fact that, not grieve, but like I cried and celebrated the fact that like I was around people where I felt like I was again. And the really cool part, like, that I'm learning more and more about these VSOs and these service organizations is they're right here in our communities. Like, as if we just took the time to look for them, they are there. They are free. There's a bunch of motivated people hanging out. It's funny. I'm the young guy in one of them right now. Like, I'm going on 40, but I'm the young guy. And the guy closest in age, and he's amazing. And I'm so grateful to have met him. He's 46 years old, and him and I are planning things together. We're doing activities together. We're building a community that isn't focused on what we did. It's focused on who we are and what we'd like to accomplish now. And I think so many people get stuck in what we did or what I did, or they look at their career and they say, this is the glory days, right?
Yeah.
But and so many civilians, people that have never had the military experience, are really curious about the glory days to an extent, and then they find out that we're just a little bit crazier than they anticipated. Because maybe we overshare or something like that, and they're like, wait, what? No, that's not what I was talking about. But when you go around a bunch of people that already know your glory days, you don't even have to worry about recollecting. You can just be yourself. You can just walk up and be like, okay, what are we doing now? And an inside joke happens, and you're just like, you guys joked about that too? Holy cow! Did you send Airman Schmuckatelli to go find the flight line, like, and bring it back? Like, did he find the keys to the Humvee? Like,
No.
those are jokes that normal people don't get.
Yeah, there's some funny ones. But I think I think it happened to me actually. Somebody got me with this. One of my supervisors, I was in the Navy. So they have 4 JGs on the ships, and they screw into the wall there like a headset, and you can talk to air traffic control and stuff like that, and like the pump rooms. And one of, I think he was a 3rd class pay officer, he's like, go get the batteries for him. And I just became a crew leader or something like that. And I was like, oh man, I was like running around with this stupid, holding the plug. I was like asked like one of our ETs or whatever they were called. I was like, I need batteries. I still need batteries for this. And I'm like, dude, it screws into the freaking wall. I was like, oh shit. They're like, yeah, you look on the wall, there's like a female end, you just screw it in. I was that 18-year-old kid. I was just so wet behind the ears. I had no clue what the hell I was doing.
Yeah. There's an instant intimacy and instant bond when hanging out with these different organizations, and we don't have to live in the past. We get to live in the present and already know who one another is, regardless of our branch of service. Even, I was talking to my brother, my older brother, who's he's just starting to get involved in the VA and organizations that are available to him. And he's just like, yeah, but I was on a ship. I didn't go to war. I didn't do what you did. And I was just like, nobody cares. Nobody cares about that. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we have shared experiences, and they just want to welcome us home. Like, they just want to be there and be of service and hopefully get you in service to others. And like, it's a really great higher mission to be a part of, like yourself, finding that higher purpose. It doesn't need to be our job. It can be what we do outside of our job, right?
It's very true. And like, one of the main things too, I like what you said, it's when you hang out with other veterans, like that's something like your brother, I've just recently started really diving into this year. I know there's like some veteran agencies around me that I want to get involved with and stuff. Like, I did my first suicide charity walk earlier this year. The first time I've ever done that. I was like, man, this is kind of nice. Like, you're around like you're saying, all these people, all these veterans and stuff like that, and you don't necessarily reflect on where you've been, but you're happy where you are and where you're going, and it's
Mm-hmm.
really refreshing because it's easy to dwell on the past. I think that's where a lot of veterans struggle with. I know that's what I did. I was like you said, your glory days. You're like, man, I was 22. That was like my prime years. It's like, no, it's not. It's like that's sad when you think about it. Like you sit back and you really think about it. That's kind of sad that you peaked at 22. But it's very true, and I've enjoyed that with talking to other veterans like yourself and the folks I've had on before, and just even outside of the podcast, people I've worked with, I bump into that are veterans. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just nice being able to say, like, when I see sometimes another sailor and they're like, "Oh, have you ever been to Thailand or you've been to Hong Kong?" All these different countries, and we're just like the instant a connection and bond. We're like, "Yeah, man, we've been there." You hear even people in the office sometimes like, "Oh, yeah, my family and I were going to, I don't know, like what's a cool place like Japan or something," and you can be like, "Oh man, I've been there. It's a pretty cool place to go to." It's like there's so many different things that are unique about being somebody in the military, and it's not
Yeah.
just people need to stop shying away from it. Embrace that you did it, cherish that you did
Mm-hmm.
it, but man, like share your stories if you can, and meet other veterans because they've probably gone through the same thing that you've gone through, and it's a journey together, and it's really fun, like you said. um, Sharing those stories. Some of them, those jokes are inside, like somebody says something and everybody kind of chuckles. Like I always tell my wife, like when we go to San Diego, that's where I was stationed primarily, and that's like, man, if you just go downtown and you just say, "Hey, shit, mate," I wonder how many people will turn around. Like it's like how many
Right.
sailors are going to turn around. It's just one of those funny things. Every time I'm down in San Diego, I just want to say it so bad. I'm just like, man, you could tell those guys are in the Navy. Or in the military. I just want to say, "Hey, shit, mate." See who they're gonna be like, "Who the hell said that?" Not the guy with the beard. That's confusing. But it's little things like that, and it's being around other veterans. I wish it didn't take me so long to do it because it's been really rewarding, as I'm sure you're
Yeah.
finding out, and your brother's gonna find out as well. It, I've my grandpa had told me a story. My grandpa was in the Navy, and he said when you go hunting, there was always the one person that never served in the military, and he's like, it always gets brought up. He's like, you're sitting around the campfire. He's like, somebody's like, "Oh, what branch were you in?" And so on and so on. And he that's kind of why I joined the Navy, not for that specific story, but subliminally, he was like, "You don't want to be that person that's just sitting there." And I was like, "Oh." Like, okay, so that's part of, like, in the whole scheme of things, one of those stories I always stuck with me. Like,
Mm.
it's an inclusive group. Um, it's very small, but it's unique. It's something to be proud about. So,
Oh yeah.
um, yeah, one of the things also before you get out here, I know we've
Mm-hmm.
gone pretty far here, but one of the things I like to ask when I actually do have a structured podcast, because sometimes this thing goes crazy. As you can imagine, you're talking some army dudes, the army guys specifically, army and Marines. I don't know what it is with those guys. Every time I have them on, this thing just you start just rambling like crazy. Kind of like I'm doing. But yeah, I
You're
like to
good, man.
ask. I like to ask how your military experiences how they've shaped who you are now, and obviously going forward and what you're getting into. I know you've kind of touched on it a little bit with your podcasts and other things coming up. So
Yeah. So, when it comes to my military experience shaping me, it helped me grow up. It helped me learn how to set goals and work to achieve them. Um, it also, helps me overcome a lot of adversity that I faced prior to service. It equipped me to handle very difficult situations. Introduced me to a group of brothers that I still hold dear, and I still do have contact. Thank goodness for the existence of social media, because
mm,
I initially pulled away when I got out, like just completely. because I was embarrassed and ashamed. Like I didn't know where I fit for so long. But we were already, like, social media already existed and we were already connected prior to my transfers. And so, those people have stuck with me, and I do now contact them pretty regularly, especially even people that I was in high school with that did end up joining the military uh, as well, just separately, right? Like we still have a common bond. These guys that I was friends with, and I can just reach out and encourage them. They give us encouragement. Since we decided to do 1 mile, one veteran, my community and my wife's community has really come forward and said, like, we're behind you guys 100%. Like, we wouldn't be moving forward if it wasn't for the encouragement and the experiences that I had. Like, I now have a medical background, for from '04 to 13. So 9 years medical training. Like I was, the healthcare provider and privy to a lot of good education and a lot of good training in those aspects. I have 4 years of teaching experience live to an audience, 1,200 students that we've graduated over the course of 2 years. They've given me very practical skills. And then they also they gave me an opportunity to really explore what I wanted to do at such a young age. They've a lot of people complain. I hear a lot of people complain about their military career and, oh, I just do what they tell me and I got shafted or XYZ. And that just was not my experience at all. It's wild. Everything that I ever asked for in the service, I got. And I don't know, like, how unique that is, but I learned, like, to just put out there the things that I'm going for, the goals that I want to achieve, the things that I want to do to the right people. Like, there's always going to be a mentor there. Like, if I'm just telling it to my buddy, like, it may not go very far, especially if they haven't had that experience. But, like, it's taught me the importance of having a mentor that I can always go and talk to and say, hey, this is what I look to accomplish. And how do I get there? Like, mentorship is something that is so overlooked. And for the first couple of years in service, I didn't know what a mentor even was. I knew what a probation officer was, not a mentor. Like, I knew what a leading petty officer was, but I didn't know that they wanted to help me grow. I thought they were just people that told me what to do. And so, the importance of finding and establishing a mentor, and that's somebody that's achieved something that you want to achieve, and you say, hey, I'm gonna learn from you. Like, I'm gonna be with you, and you're gonna tell me what it is that I can do to be like you, and I'm gonna do it because you're cool, and I want to be able to do what you do, right?
And I'm sure it's like a humbling experience too. Like, if from when you were training people, and I'm sure you've had sailors or Marines that aspire to be in that role eventually too. So I'm sure it's even humbling. You're like, wow, it's kind of nice, like I'm meaning something to somebody. They're looking up to me and they're entrusting me for knowledge like that. It's got to be humbling.
It's a surreal experience to be the guy that people do go to and ask advice from. But one of the things that I've also learned is, like, never be the smartest person in my friend group, because then I'm doing it wrong. Like, I don't want to know it all, because then my education is just going to drop. Like, so I for any of my friends that are listening, like, you're friends with me because you're smarter than me. So sorry that I'm bringing down the curve. Like, I look up to each and every one of my close friends. They all have tremendous value in my life. Even just conversations, like, learning how to have a normal conversation is really important to me. and I have friends that teach me even how to do that. And so, like, the biggest takeaway was, like, the military taught me how to set myself up for success. I just had to, I had to stop talking and listen a lot more, and I wish I would have done it earlier. But I eventually learned the lesson.
That's very true. And that's kind of like what I was kind of going back to earlier when we were kind of talking about. It's like veterans are uniquely equipped, and I don't think a lot of veterans realize it when they get out. Like you were saying, to handle certain situations and all these different things. Like we've gone through a whole lot. Most veterans experience a whole lot of stressful, high tense situations at very early age. I can almost guarantee most 18-year-olds don't experience through however old. I mean, you can do 20, 30 years in the military and you're going to go through things that the average person can't fathom. So it's like we are uniquely equipped to handle a lot of things that we might not realize we're able to do, and it's acknowledging that we can do it. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. I think it's interesting that we have those tools, those at our disposal, and we don't acknowledge them. We don't use them. We are usually extremely disciplined when it comes to work. We work efficiently. We work quick and hard. And when we get out, we don't apply them. We just for some reason, we just forget everything we just learned and built the last 4 years, 30 years that you're in, and you lose it. And it's a shame that it happens, because we are very uniquely equipped to handle a whole lot of things. And a veteran, I hope more veterans that listen and more veterans that are people that transition out of the military start realizing that, like, you're not just a veteran anymore. You're a very unique person in the grand scheme of things. At 22 years old, if you get out, man, you've experienced so many different things compared to somebody that went straight to college and they're working at a part-time job doing something, or I was going to say like a Blockbuster, but they're not around anymore. But you know what I mean? Something like along those lines, where they're just getting by. They're not experiencing those high intense situations like you were in Afghanistan, or working on a flight deck, or whatever it may be, driving a Humvee, working or operating a tank or anything like that. So it's like, man, we're awesome. We got to start realizing that we're awesome, and the opportunities are endless for us if we acknowledge it, that they're there. You got free college when you get out. I always encourage everybody to jump on that. Even if it's not the reason why you joined, it's not the reason why I joined, but hey, it's free. You sacrifice something for it, utilize it. Because, man, you start getting degrees and the paperwork associated with your veteran status, the sky really becomes the limit, because most agencies associate a veteran with those things: that discipline, hard work. You're going to be on time. You're going to do your job fast and efficient. And now you got the knowledge and the paperwork behind you to back it also. And that's, I mean, even more impressive to me. So,
yeah. And then the other aspect of that is also, we come with all of this experience, is to also remember that humility, that, well, we come with, myself, 11 years experience, right? When I got out, I didn't have 11 years civilian experience. Another guy had 11 years civilian experience. So like he put in the time at that company, right? He put in the time with those coworkers. And so, especially like if your profession is your biggest stressor, take the time to learn the trade, be willing to take those entry-level positions, because the work that we put in the service is going to show through. Like, we will be the standouts because of the skills that we learned, and, don't try to necessarily be a jack of all trades. Like, be that skilled professional. Go after the job that you want to do, or else, you may end up in a job that you had no desire to do in the very beginning. A lot of people are just like, oh, I'm going to take the first job that pays the salary. And it's just like, well, that's not really worth it, or what I want to be doing. Like, so many of the guys that I know, like, I joined during a time of war, knowing and being 100% willing that I would give my life for this country. There's not many jobs that I want to do that I have that same level of dedication to. Like now I want to
Definitely.
give my life for my family, right? Like I
Yeah.
want to give my life for my community. I don't want to give my life for somebody else's dollar. That's just me personally. And so, having that perspective of pick the job that you want to do. If you need to put the food on the table for your family, like take that job. However, get involved in another organization. If you have kids, get them involved in an after school program and become a coach with that, right? Like get involved with that so that you're giving back to your community, you're having a bit of a higher purpose than just going home and being exhausted, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Because you
something
don't
that.
want to. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you finish that thought.
Yeah, because I was going to say, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself, and
Hmm.
I think that happens. Like I've known a number of veterans, and I've done this myself when I first got out. You're aiming for the sky's the limit with the job. Like you're shooting for like the biggest, baddest job possible. But like you said, there's that civilian that's been grinding already for a number of years. So you do got to take the humble pie as well. And like you said, take those entry level jobs, work your way up. Because if you're willing to get to that position that that person has, and you really want it, that's where you want to be. You'll work for it. You'll
Hmm.
get there. You'll stand out. It'll
Hmm.
come quicker than you think.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and that's what I've told one of my friends who got out about a year and a half ago. I was like, man, I told him you can do whatever you want out here. It's easy to outwork people. I still think it really is. It's just society in general today. I feel like it really is. Like if you show initiative and you show up on time and you can do it. Sky's the limit. People are shy away from things like that, and if you can do it, more power to you. And I mean, hopefully that's what happens for him. So
My my coworkers used to laugh because they would come up to me and say, "Oh, you have a very stressful job." I mean, it was communications, and they were like, "Oh, your job is so stressful. Like you've got so much on your plate." And I would look at them and go, "This this is enjoyable. Like there's like I love the company that I'm working for, and nobody's gonna die if I mess up. Like that's a great balance."
yeah, it's like a good stress. I know that's weird to some people. When I was project managing, it was like construction industry, and when
Hmm.
things would go awry and things would happen, people are like, "Oh my god, what are you going to do?" Our batch plant broke, and we're not going to be able to pour this on time for the stadium that we're shipping to. I'm like, well, I'll tell them and we'll figure something out. Like, oh, you're not worried? I'm like, no, dude. It's just I don't know. I
We'll
love what
get
I'm
it done.
doing. I'm not. Yeah, we're going to get there eventually. I'm not super stressed about it. I know we'll be fine. It's like, relax, man. It's okay. We've been here.
It's
We've
that
done it.
appropriate level of stress.
Yeah, it's good. It's like I'm stressed, and they're like, because like I told you, like I've been told I'm pre-even keel, and they're like, oh man, like you're not stressed. Like, no, I am. But, like internally, I'm like, holy crap, I gotta make a phone call, and this guy's gonna yell at me. But
Hmm.
I've had it happened before, and I just know how to navigate that scenario, and it's kind of a
Right.
good stress. Like it's weird, and I used to tell people this when I would train them. It's like I can't teach you how to handle certain situations. I can teach you how to know the product, know material, know the ins and outs of our business. But when things go awry, I can't teach you how to do that. It's kind of like a self thing. I think I can give
Yeah.
you tools that might help you, but I mean, I don't know. It is a good stress. I do like there's a certain stress level and certain avenues I find like that keep you honest. I like to tell people it
Hmm.
keeps you honest. Certain stress keeps you honest. Um, I kind of like when things go crazy because it's like, oh man, now I'm awake. Let's do it. Like if it's going smooth, it's you get kind of complacent and lazy. So it's good to have that
Mm,
little stress factor every once in a while.
I
But
can understand that.
it's a weird thing,
Totally.
right?
It's it's good to get the blood pumping every now and then, and also it's good repetition because it forces our brains to think a little bit quicker, right? Like,
Hmm.
and we say, oh, okay, I can handle that. Because sometimes I know that I doubt myself from time to time on my abilities in certain arenas, and then I know that I've gone through the training, and it's kind of like think about battle stations on our general quarters on a ship. Like, you do all this training to put out a fire, and then when they actually call away general quarters for a true emergency, like, you realize that the training was actually able to put into practice. Like, you were actually able to put out a legit fire on that ship because you trained for it. And so, when you're in a workplace and you've been training for something, you're actually able to put it into practice without ever having to actually experience the real thing one time. Like, the training actually does something.
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, that's very true. So, well, all right, Danny.
Wild.
I know we're hitting our mark here. So, any last words for the audience here before we wrap up?
Yeah. One, please, if you care about helping prevent veteran suicide, get involved in a veteran community. Listen to our podcast, 1 Mile, 1 Veteran. It starts streaming on, we release our first episodes on September 5th. We are already up on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any other podcast platform that we know of. If you can't find us, reach out to me directly, Danny at 1mile1veteran.com, and I will find a way to troubleshoot that issue and get our podcast to where you listen. Visit our website, pick up a shirt, show your support. My wife and I are currently selling our home to fund this for 2 years.
Wow.
So that this can be our job full-time for the next 2 years. We are so dedicated to helping our community, and we know that this is going to be a community effort. We know that suicide prevention awareness and efforts are effective, as at least statistics show. The number of suicides amongst the veteran community has lowered during times of increased awareness and normalizing that mental health speech. So please support us, continue to support guys like Travis, get involved in your veteran community. And thank you so much for having me on, Travis. I appreciate you.
No problem. You have a good one, Danny. Good luck. I mean, I'll be rooting for you. I'll definitely be in. So can't wait. Appreciate it. You have a good one.